Okay, since the time when I made the video talking about my disappointment with the lack of English VAs in Genshin's latest content, I thought that things were finally turning for the better for the state of their English voiceovers. It was announced that they were changing up their English recording studio to Site Global, which is not affected by the strike. Bar the 5.3 Lanterite, I was beginning to notice a bit more presence from the older English cast, so I thought things were honestly starting to turn up, and that Hoyo has finally reached a point in their old contract with Formosa where they can begin shifting their voice actors and would eventually get the English voiceovers back in working order. Until March 26th, which would be a couple of days before this video gets released. Okay, what in the actual fuck happened, guys? From characters being recasted, VA Union being absolute pricks, to VAs absolutely turning on one another, it's time for y'all to buckle up and listen to some more barely edited rant from yours truly. So, the whole thing that started this for me was when someone in my server sent a couple of Twitter posts alongside information that honestly disappointed me. As he wrote that Keqing's English VA, Kaylee Mills, alongside a couple of other VAs, were bullying Kenichi's new voice actor, Jacob Takanashi. Now, I didn't even know that Kenichi was getting recasted, and it seems like as of 5.5, the Science of Canopy Scout will have a new voice going forward. I was aware that Hoyo has been recasting several roles across their other games such as Argenti in Star Rail, as well as Soldier 11 and Lycan in Zenless, but this is the first that I heard of a Genshin recast. Still, thinking that it was a shame yet also understandable, I checked off the chain of tweets. It all began with Jacob Takanashi himself announcing that he is the new voice of Kenichi and that he is honored to have joined the team. Pretty normal stuff so far, and I thought that it would remain that way since the first reply that I saw to that tweet was Auroron's VA Nathan Noakes welcoming Jacob into the party. But what ended up following suit was an onslaught of replies that were essentially condemning and bullying Jacob for supposedly having taken that role from a fellow voice actor who was currently standing in solidarity in a strike that was meant to save the careers of those voice actors against the use of AI. That's where the other VA's tweets come into play, with Keqing's voice actor saying, "This is actually kinda diabolical. If you need the money, at least take the role uncredited. This just comes off as an easy grab for clout. It's not a good look." Another voice actor dude who I think is not involved with Hoyo at all then says, "This is pretty awful stuff, man. Selling out your peers and the future of this industry for a role? Please stay far away. This is utterly gross. I hope you take a step back and consider what it is you are doing to your fellow actors, let alone what you are doing to this career." For more context, let's take a look at the statement that John Patnuat, Kenichi's former voice actor, released regarding his recasting. Basically, he mentions that he has been refusing service in lieu of the SAG-Aftra strikes, he didn't expect to get recasted, so with him mentioning that Kenichi has not been voiced for 6 months, then I can only assume that he actually hasn't been working on Kenichi for a while longer than that since many Hoyo contents are recorded way before their official releases. Now, the confusing part comes from where he mentions that Hoyo is at fault for his unwillingness to come back on to voice Kenichi, because Hoyo specifically has not agreed to sign an interim agreement which was supposed to give the voice actors the proper protection against AI. This completely blanked me because my understanding for the better part of the last, 6 or 8 months on this strike is that Hoyo doesn't call the shots when it comes to signing anything. They are using voice acting studios, which are the ones who have the call to sign anything in relation to their English VAs. A lot of people, myself included, went under the assumption that since they moved to Site Global, which as far as I know wasn't affected by the strike as a studio, that they were finally shifting stuff to make voicing the EN dub possible once more. But apparently, the understanding we have now is that Genshin as a project is the one affected by the strike, instead of it being affected by proxy of an asshole recording studio, which most of the original voice actors are still probably linked with through old contracts. This would also explain why much newer voices such as Auroron, Lanyan, and Mizuki are all fully voiced since they are from Site Global and are therefore not affected by the strike since Site Global is officially based in Tokyo. And Japan is actually competent unlike a certain nation of so-called freedom and have the proper laws and protection in place for their voice actors. So while they do have a VA union themselves, they are not donkeys who looks like they want to be in control of everything. Now, of course, with people seeing the statement, "Oh, I refuse to work because Hoyo wouldn't sign something," there are quite a lot of people who immediately jumped on the Hoyo hate train, which seems to be all the rage for the better part of the last half a year, and they were quick to shit on Hoyo through every point and turn of that thread. Hoyo is disgusting for not protecting their voice actors. Fuck Hoyo, you did the right thing. Fuck the Genshin community. Fuck Hoyoverse, they've become a horrible company anyway. And you know what? I said in my last video that I was just disappointed and frustrated in general. But now, I'm actually feeling some disappointment towards some of these voice actors. Because for all the pissing and prancing they are doing about how great this interim deal is, they fail to actually disclose what signing the interim might spell for the recording studios, Hoyo, and the scene of US voice acting in general. No one wants to particularly defend Hoyo here because apparently it's a death sentence to do that these days. But not only do I think that Hoyo just straight up had every right to do what they are doing right now, they also have the more logical side of the situation for us to be thinking about. Let's break it down from the point of view of a neutral, and we will begin from John's statement of his recasting. First point of clarification, John Potnot is not a SAG-Aftra affiliated voice actor. John is non-union. This is a critical factor since it means that they have no union nor contractual obligations to uphold the strike the same way the rest of his SAG-Aftra pals are. However, John is refusing to work to stand in solidarity with their fellow VAs, which is good and all, but we should do well to remember the rest of the circumstances. Being a non-union actor means that you still have to adhere to the recording studio's call for work, and they don't actually have to adhere to what you are striking about. Just like what happened with the recast of Lycon, just because you're standing in solidarity doesn't mean you get an automatic pass to not work without consequences. They will try to call you back, and if it comes time where they just had enough of waiting, they have every right to replace you. Voice roles at the end of the day is still a job, and for a live service game that is updating constantly like Genshin is, the impact of that voice's absence will only grow larger and larger the more and more silent patches we get. And while I understand their cause and, personally, I can still sort of stomach the missing voices, it doesn't mean that I'm happy when shit like this happens in the game.
I wish to soar with him and see the world beyond the sky.
So, not only were the employers losing patience, the players who are experiencing the product are beginning to sound more of their dissatisfaction as well. And mind you, Kenichi has been missing voices since 5.1, literally one patch after he got released. And considering how much of the content afterwards involves him and Nathan, and that many of the other compatriot voice actors are still having their characters voiced in the game, it is safe to say that many people have gotten their experiences ruined. Suffice to say, I think it's logical for Hoyo and the players to be upset, and they have every right to feel that way. Now, a lot of you would probably still be saying, then have Hoyo sign the interim agreement. It's that simple. Hoyo are the greedy AI using bastards for not wanting to sign. As someone who is familiar with how bullshit unions can be, this is where I urge you protesters to calm the shit down and actually familiarize yourself with how SAG-Aftra operates as a union for voice actors and what this interim agreement is subtly trying to achieve behind the whole guise of AI protection. In the interim agreement that SAG sends to international companies, this is a sentence in a part of a clause regarding union security that is still within their documents as of me writing this video on March 28, 2025. Employer will only employ performers covered by this agreement who are members of SAG-Aftra. Reading this, a lot of people immediately assumed, oh, that means that the non-union voice actors are screwed because any company who signs this agreement will only be able to use SAG actors. Well, you're not entirely wrong, it's just that you need more steps to fully understand it, because a lot of the other people who are still shitting on Hoyo would say that, no, that's misinformation, because the clause clearly states afterwards that nothing in this agreement will be construed as preventing employer from hiring non-SAG-Aftra members. So, the Hoyo defenders are actually the ones that are wrong and are the ones spreading misinformation. But then, what a lot of those naysayers like to do is to not use that sentence in its full form, to which you will find it to say, Nothing in this agreement will be construed as preventing employer from hiding non-SAG-Aftra members in accordance with the Taft-Hartley Act to perform in interactive programs. Now, this Taft-Hartley piece of bullshit is what actually spells trouble for people who are just signing this thing without thinking. The Taft-Hartley Act in SAG's case is basically a set of procedures and documents that allow a non-union worker to work on union projects. That sounds relatively simple. However, the kicker is that one Taft-Hartley document allows you to work on as many union projects as you want for only a range of 30 days, which means that you have to book projects within those 30 days. Which means that if you want to do another union project outside of the first 30-day validity of your first Taft-Hartley document, you'd have another count added to the document's usage. You do this 3 times, then you will have to join SAG-Aftra as a union member. The thing is, joining SAG is not as simple as giving a portfolio, getting your information done, and maybe pay a couple of bucks and voila, you are a SAG member. It's all that, and you have to pay an initiation fee of $3,000, and you have annual dues that you have to pay if you are a SAG member, which are at a base of $236, with work dues calculated from 1.6% of your covered earnings up to a maximum of $1 million. Let me just tell you something. In the realms of voice acting work, $3,000 is a lot of money. So honestly, $3,000 is a lot of money regardless of what this situation is. This is the issue that a lot of people are currently overlooking. Because let's take the problematic parts of the clause and make it all make sense for the eyes of us neutrals. Okay, first part. Employer will only employ performers covered by this agreement who are members of SAG-Aftra. And considering that if those who signed the interim agreement still have to follow the Taft-Hartley procedure for their non-union voice actors, eventually, Hoyo and their voice recording intermediaries will always be forced to use union voice actors. Because think about it, Taft-Hartley's only last for 30 days, and Genshin as a live service project definitely runs on a schedule that far exceeds those 30 days. If you, a non-union voice actor, are casted in a role within this game, and this game becomes a union project, then you'd have to constantly get a Taft-Hartley every time they ask you to come back to voice your respective roles, which could span many months in between those periods of times. Much more so when you are working on different games from the same publisher. Eventually you, the non-union guy, will use up those Taft-Hartleys, and the biggest issue is you only get 3 of those in your lifetime. There's no way to reset that count unless you literally become a different identity. Once you reach the 3 count threshold, you either join up, or you are most likely forced out of the role by proxy of not being able to be part of that project in the first place. Or you then have to negotiate even further with SAG for other different agreements, and that just sounds like a whole nother headache in the first place, plus maybe it comes with more financial burden. The inclusion of this clause is pointed by a lot of people who describes it as an attempt by SAG-Aftra to monopolize the way English voice acting is done in any international project that remotely involves the US. If they force Genshin to be a union project, then what would that spell for the non-union VAs who are either unwilling to join up or just simply can't afford to join up? And what sort of legal kerfuffle would it spell in relation to the other dubs that already exist in the game? And what if Hoyo wants to hire English talents outside of the US? And considering their move to site global, this interim agreement just becomes a whole nother headache that I think Hoyo, recording studios, and players are just simply unwilling to deal with, and rightfully so. And to be clear, this whole SAG being difficult thing is nothing new. Sean Chiplock, the big man D-Luke voice actor himself, has previously expressed his dissatisfaction with how SAG-Aftra strong-arms people into becoming a member. SAG pushes extremely hard for people to sign on as full members to the extent of borderline bullying those who start as or switch to FICOR because they're enjoying all the benefits of the membership without actively contributing to their funding. And by the way, what you anti-AI diehards need to understand is that Sean wrote that in correlation to the fact that SAG-Aftra themselves have a signed contract with an AI company called Ethovox that was updated as recently as October 2024. And while you may argue that this deal is to make sure that VAs get proper credit if they ever consent to using AI, I think is just a stupid ass backwards way of doing things, especially when evidently a lot of voice actors in SAG-Aftra themselves are both unaware of it being a thing and are also very much against this deal being a thing. Because, of course, what's the fucking point of striking for all this AI protection when your union has already provided a method for companies to legally take advantage of potential loopholes within that deal? We've seen these kind of ploys go on from these kind of corporations before. One day, if not completely barred by law itself, they are gonna find a way to turn the deal around on the voice actors. Besides, why have AI involved at all? If they wanna build language models, feel free to use normal people. It doesn't need to be someone who can necessarily voice act, no? In stark contrast to Sean, there is also Hoi Dao, who we all know voices Ian Albedo, who tries to explain to people that studios can negotiate SAG's must-join rule, and he mentions that non-union workers can come in via Taft-Hartley anytime they want. But he completely failed to even disclose about how predatory SAG's Taft-Hartley is, and what's even worse was that when he is pressed by other people on Twitter about SAG's terms, he did not say a word. Sure, he is willing to say that this isn't a union versus non-union worker situation. No, it isn't that. To the voice actors, it probably isn't. But to SAG, the requirements of initiation fees and annual dues would probably paint a whole different picture for those willing to read the situation further. Contracts are still the most valid protection they can get against AI. And considering the fact that the other Hoyo connected studios have come out to say that they have extensive AI protection built in their VA contracts, I think the likelihood of Hoyo making use of AI to replace VAs are basically next to none. One, they are actually one of the few companies that I've seen, especially in the gacha space, that have shown extensive care towards their VAs, helping them in every step of the way to the best of their abilities, from solving payment issues to making sure that the bad eggs of their cast are well dealt with. Hoyo has provably shown that they care. Plus, as a China-based company, China has very strict laws when it comes to the use of AI in order to impersonate a person's likeness. And while it may not be that straightforward of a deal in terms of jurisdiction, I highly doubt that Hoyo would ever risk doing anything that could remotely put them within the crosshairs of the CCP. If there was no stupid union mandate, I'm sure Hoyo would have signed that agreement in a heartbeat. Besides, I for one am someone who firmly believes that AI will never ever come close to replicating good voice acting, at least in the next, century, I guess. Good being the key here, since sure, AI can replicate voices, but at best, it is basically mediocre and people can still very much tell in an instant. Good to great voice acting requires great control of one's emotions. Human emotion is still the one thing that computers have not come anywhere close to accurately computing, and unless they have a computer that accounts for literally every single bit of emotion and reactions that over 7 billion people on this earth can display, then it will never reach that level of capability. Anyway, this willful vagueness is where my disappointment with the voice actors started, at least towards the ones that have been so vocal about shitting on a new, innocent, and well-meaning voice actor when those shit-talkers haven't exactly been open with what the interim agreement actually entails and are only willing to say half-truths just because it better fits their agenda. Plus how they can't even acknowledge that parties such as Hoyo, recording studios, and others involved have every right to be wary of what this agreement actually constitutes. Or at least, if they do acknowledge it, they have done an absolute piss-poor job of communicating that to us, the players, who are keeping their products and roles alive. It is also fair to say that those union voice actors should have known the risk of taking the job in Genshin. Genshin is a non-union project. It always has been, and it never had any intentions of being unionized the way SAG wanted it to be. And it makes sense considering the varying dubs they have and how wide their scope of work is. They wouldn't want to be bogged down by the union rules of one of their dubs. SAG members are in official capacity prohibited from working in non-union projects. It always has been that way. It's literally their global rule number 1. But apparently, SAG has always just kinda looked the other way when their members work on non-union stuff. But now that everything has flipped on its ass and they are trying to enforce their grip over these actors through the AI protection shit, these VAs are scrambling and are looking for someone to blame other than themselves. Who else is there to blame other than the people who hired them in the first place, instead of the union who has been letting things spiral out to begin with? Wouldn't it also be logical to say that this strike should slowly be against SAG instead of with SAG, considering their increasingly monopolizing practices? However, at the end of the day, we know that they can't exactly speak out this way because that might compromise their position in regards to being affiliated with SAG-Aftra. So they tread around eggshells, and they are also using this AI protection shenanigan to veer away from the major issues that their own union is cooking up. I'm just really further disappointed because of two things. One is that, in part to John's post, these VAs are shifting the blame to Hoyo, their employer, who, let's be honest here, have been insanely generous and patient in their position towards the strike and what it means for one of their star products. They are letting the company who has been so understanding of their position, so accommodating to their troubles, bore all the giant brunt of the criticism, especially when these VAs should know what it means to put Hoyo in the crossfire, whilst absolutely ignoring the notion that they have very valid reasons to stay away from the agreement. The moment the opportunity presented itself to fully throw Hoyo under the bus, these actors took it without reservation, and that I just cannot accept. Thankfully for Hoyo, some of us can still refrain from immediately judging and read the situation further. So they probably knew that with the public interim agreement documents, people can just easily see why they are not signing to begin with. And obviously, number two is that they are using this whole thing as an excuse to bully a new voice actor who's done nothing but take a job that he seems to be well qualified for. It is the hypocrisy of, oh, we are striking to protect our livelihood, but at the sight of someone else from their career path actually trying to maintain their livelihood and taking over a job from someone who hasn't been doing it for months, they immediately put the guy through the stakes and condemn him for all the wrong reasons, even when it's eventually mentioned that the guy didn't know anything about the strike. Jacob is based in Tokyo, so he was far along away from being involved with this whole shit in the first place. He was just a voice actor taking on a role that is in need of a replacement and is just trying to get by doing what his career entails him to do. And suddenly, he just gets bullied into oblivion by others who don't even have a full grasp of the situation in the first place. Kaching's VA snidely said, even if you need the money, at least do it uncredited. Like, what? I thought the point of the strike was to also make sure that VAs get proper credit for what they do, and now you're telling someone to remain uncredited when they literally don't have to do that? On the flip side, some people are also trying to hold John accountable for the flack that Jacob is getting, and I say good on that, because in John's post, the part that says, I'd hope that any progress behind the scenes would be made, or that if Rika's auditions went out, my colleagues wouldn't read for them. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Is definitely a jab intended at whoever was casted to replace him. Well, as it happens, John, the world is a lot wider than just the immediate vicinity of LA, and talents exist far outside of it. You should have known the risk you are taking by standing in solidarity, and that your role is replaceable, and the way you conducted your stance far makes it from being a forever guarantee. This is a whole lot different with how Soldier 11's former VA, Emery Chase, responded to the news of her being recasted. She acknowledges that she was replaced because she held work back and accepted the risk striking as a non-union VA. There was no small jab about having a colleague recasting her and all that, just acknowledgement of her responsibilities, and that's it. However, she, just like Hoi Dao, is also guilty for criminally oversimplifying how Taft-Hartley's truly work, as shown from a connected tweet from her response thread, which is again somewhat of a microcosm of what many of these English VAs are shown to be saying. I'm not gonna say whether or not they are actually withholding any further information or they just simply don't know, but either option spells a lot of trouble for me. It's just ironic really. In their quest to not get replaced by AI, they seem to have completely forgotten that actual people can still replace them, which in regards to all things is still very much fair game. Yeah, so that's why I'm really disappointed. The VAs involved, you know who you are. The ones who are keeping their silence should keep it that way if they have nothing nice or remotely educational to say. And to Jacob, hold your head high and keep doing what you're doing, man. best of luck with the work as Kenichi, and I personally look forward to seeing what you bring as Kenichi. Not that I have a really high bar. I, for one, don't have him, and it's been a long while since I even last heard the guy say anything in-game, so his voice has really faded away from me. So I'll have the privilege of being able to listen to Kenichi in a fresh new light. Ignore the hate, and know that some sensible folks are still happy to see you come in. Also, it was brought to my attention that Kaylee Mills also tried to defend Moses' former voice actor when all the allegations about him resurfaced. And that's just about another dagger for me, because if these pictures are anything to go by, I heckin' love Kaching. And I genuinely love her work as Kaching. But it just leaves a whole ass sour taste in my mouth knowing that all of this transpired with her being one of the main linchpins. So my conclusion to all of this is basically this. AI users, stay the fuck off of voice acting. Genshin English VAs who are bullying Jacob and making more drama in Hoyo's expense on Twitter, fucking get your shit together. Genshin English VAs who have been silent, please communicate better with the fans. Any of your resources that I find so far entails nothing of what I've learned through this research, and as far as me trying to educate myself, it's been a very confusing experience because of how vague everyone is being. And people who are still telling me to watch Josieha's video about this, honestly, just go and eat some balls. I've watched that video multiple times and it helps with nothing. And to SAG-Aftra, stop being so fucking American. Make a fair and workable solutions with non-union actors. Stop trying to make everyone pay $3,000 in annual fees just to better line your pockets so you can make backstabbing calls against the very people who are literally the backbone of your existence. Okay, that's it. That's the video. I'm just probably gonna go back to wallowing at the fact that my EN voices are gonna remain incomplete for a long ass time. It's depressing that the most surefire way of moving past this is to actually just recast the whole OGVA, especially considering their whole union worker and working non-union shenanigan. It just seems to be the main thing that is giving Hoyo a butt ton of headache. But obviously, this is unrealistic both in terms of game direction, union rules, and contractual work, so we're just gonna have to wait for a different solution. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see y'all next time. Sayonara.